Good morning. Welcome to Get Out of Your Telling Habit, Ask More Effective Questions with Katie Anderson. I'm Christy Snow with Results Washington. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be your moderator today. We do have about just over 1,200 attendees who have registered for this session, and we are so happy you're here. I am joined today by Catherine Thomas, who will be providing ASL interpretation, and a special thanks to my team member, Kathy, who is managing technology on the behind the scenes. A few housekeeping things. We know many of you are familiar with Zoom meetings, but there are some differences in Zoom webinar, which is what we're using today. The biggest difference is you won't be able to talk or have your video visible. This ensures all participants can focus on today's presentation. I want to draw your attention to a few different features in Zoom and how we'll use them. If you move your mouse, the toolbar will appear and you can see icons for the chat and Q&A. Please be aware these are two different features. The chat will be available for the session today, and it will be utilized for certain activities during the presentation. However, if you have any questions at all during the presentation, please drop those in the Q&A box, and that's where we'll be collecting those questions. If you experience any technical issues, also use the Q&A feature for that as well, and we will do our best to help you with any of your technical issues. Next, you'll notice an icon for closed captioning. If you wish to see closed captioning, just click on that button, and you can select Show Subtitle, or you can view the full transcript. You can also adjust your view to make the presentation or the speaker larger by sliding the vertical bar on your screen from left to right. Session materials are available on our website, and videos will be available within a week. If we get disconnected or run into technical troubles, we will try to get the webinar back up for about 5 minutes, and in the event we are unable to do so, we will record the session and post that on our website. Finally, at the end of the session, a survey will pop up. Please take the time to complete this really quick, it's only 3-minute survey. And this provides the presenter and us at Results Washington real-time feedback. We are very fortunate to have Katie Anderson with us today. Katie is an internationally recognized leadership coach, speaker, and author of best-selling book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, known for helping individuals and organizations lead with intention. She has over 20 years of experience in supporting change and improvement across diverse industries. In 2013, Katie founded her consulting practice to work with leaders at all levels to connect and align their purpose, process, and practice to achieve higher levels of performance. Katie also presented at our Lean conference last year. Thank you so much for being here, Katie. I will hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. I'm thrilled to be here for the second year in a row at Results Washington, talking today about one of my most favorite topics, which is how to break our telling habit, because I believe it is fundamentally one of the most important habits that we can break and one of the most powerful things that we can do as human beings, as leaders, as coaches. So I'm going to start off and ask you a question as we get started here today. And please, I'll be utilizing the chat function throughout this session for you to engage and put your reflections in as well. So think of a moment in time that you felt engaged and supported to think and take initiative for problem solving and innovation at your company or at a different organization. It could be in your personal life. What were some of the conditions that surrounded that time where you felt really engaged and supported? And put those into the chat. The reason I'm starting with this is because we all know what it feels like to be engaged, to be supported. And these are the conditions that we want to create in our organization. Yeah, great. Mutual trust, open, transparent communication, autonomy, trust. Yes, ask my perspective. So honesty. Yes, we know what it feels like. And so let's anchor on that as we go through our time for the next hour and talk about how our habit of telling sometimes inhibits this very thing that we're trying to create here. So thank you. Oh yes, it's so good. My opinion matters. I'm valued. I'm bringing forward my ideas. I'm being asked. Chrissy had a great introduction for me, so I won't continue on here, but I accept that saying that I really believe that my purpose, what gives me joy and meaning in my life, both personally and professionally, is to inspire and enable people around the world to live and lead with intention. And this word intention, we use it a lot in the English language. Set your intention, let's be intentional, but what does it really mean? I have come to see intention as really connecting with our heart, with our purpose, what is most important to us, who do we want to be? And then not just having the idea of that, but how do we align our actions and take action to fulfill that purpose, to be the person we want to be? And so we always have control over how we act, or making adjustments to how we act and in showing up to fulfill our own purpose. So reflect for yourself as we go through this time. What's your purpose in the world? And also, what's your purpose in different times, in different relationships or interactions throughout your day? And we'll talk about how that relates to our telling habit. I also want to link it to one of the profound lessons that I took away from 40-year leader Isao Yoshino, and which I've written about in the book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn. And this is tied directly to the concepts of lean and the Toyota production system that so many of us have been trying to emulate or copy in our organizations, bring this concept of Kaizen to our companies. And I kept asking Mr. Yoshino when I first met him in 2015. And for those of you who don't know, I actually lived in Japan for 18 months in 2015 and 16, and have subsequently continued a really meaningful relationship with Isao Yoshino, who was part of Toyota's, intentional journey of becoming the people-centered learning organization we know. And I kept asking him, what was the secret to Toyota? And he'd said, there is no secret, there is no secret. And finally, one day he said, the only secret is an attitude towards learning. And this, if we think about it, all the tools, all the processes, the plan, do, study, adjust cycles, it's all about learning. How do we make problems visible? And then how do we encourage people's creativity and thinking around solving problems? And that is why this habit of telling is so important to get out of. And we'll cover why that is today. So what we're going to be covering today is the welcome and overview, which we're doing right now. I'm going to talk about this habit of telling and what I call the leadership continuums that we have to navigate. We're then going to talk about the power of asking and listening, and how do we lead with intention. And then there'll be some opportunities for some tangible practices that you can take away to strengthen your habit of asking, and you'll set your intention for what you're going to take away and start practicing immediately after we follow this session today. So talking about my intention to fulfill my purpose, my intention for you is to have fun, to learn something new, walk away feeling inspired, and also with an identified goal for improvement to break your own telling habit. One of the things that I have found so helpful for being more intentional is slowing down to pause and take what I call an intention pause. And so I'm inviting you to take an intention pause today and reflect and put into the chat how engaged you intend to be today during the remaining 50 minutes of our session, on a scale of 1, which is completely not engaged, to 7, fully engaged. So put that into the chat. It's okay to be wherever you are on this spectrum, but it's an opportunity to acknowledge for yourself where you are and what maybe adjustments you need to make to fulfill your purpose for showing up here today. Great, loving seeing so many responses. Thank you for the engagement. All right, so moving into this topic of the habit of telling, if you think about your own organization now or past organizations that you've worked in, what are some of the things that discourage people from thinking and taking responsibility for problem solving and innovation? So we started off with that concept, that idea of what are times that you felt really engaged. So what are those times where people have felt discouraged? Yeah, and please put that into the chat. Harsh criticism, not feeling safe, fear, judgment, being dismissed, fear, lack of trust, not being empowered, not taken seriously, Yeah, many layer. Well, it's great. Yes, we all have those experiences too, where we felt discouraged. And this concept of blame is a really important one that we are not going to dive into here today, but how do we create an environment that welcomes problems and looks at the process and not the people? But so many things here. I mean, you just scroll through this chat here. We have this experience. In addition to so many of these things being shut down, lack of buy-in, not understanding, feeling criticized, one of the things that I have observed in all of the organizations I've worked in and work with is it's when you or I or someone else jumps in to tell people tell them what to do and give the answer or what we think is the answer. We're not giving people space to solve a problem. So you're just basically telling them what to do. And one of the challenges is that we often think we're giving space for learning, but we're really in feeling burnt out or running around. It feels easier just to tell, or sometimes in the spirit of being helpful, we think it's easier to just give our answer or tell them what to do. But the impact is that people feel shut down in all of these things that you said here. They feel shut down, not engaged, not part of the problem solving, not being given the responsibility. And so one of the first continuums that we need to learn to navigate as human beings is this asking and telling continuum. It's not that telling is bad and that asking is right. It's about knowing when to tell and when to ask. And one of the unintended outcomes of when we tell someone the answer, give someone the answer, offer our suggestions, advocate for a solution is who owns the problem? You do. And so often I hear, and I've experienced this myself, the feeling of burnt out, like, oh my God, I've too much to do. I don't have time. I've like so many problems to solve and I'm just trying to get everything done. It's because we're not giving people ownership for problem solving. And sometimes we're not even aware that the reason this ownership has been taken away is because we're giving all our ideas and taking away some of that responsibility or opportunity for someone else to take the lead on solving a problem. So we create this environment where we are running around firefighting and we don't have time to grow and develop people. And the challenge is we get in this habit of everything being a 5-alarm fire that needs us to rush in and show up as an expert or jump in with the problem solving, when in fact, if we can slow down and see the opportunities, yes, there are definitely crises or situations that need all hands on deck. We obviously don't want an error to hit go out to a patient or a customer, or, we need to fix something now. But more often than not in our organizations, we have time for a little bit of problem solving where we can allow growth and development for other people. So think about how can you create those spaces? And then how does that get you off the vicious cycle of feeling like you don't have the time to grow and develop and ask questions? So this is one of the main challenges that we have, is that we are rewarded through school and early in our careers for being the experts, for solving problems, for having the right answer. And this is great. We need people who have expertise in a certain topic or a certain functional area, and we grant them problem-solving ownership. However, when we are moving into a coaching role or a leadership or a management role, our purpose shifts from us being the person owning the problem to us now having the responsibility and the purpose of helping others solve the problem. Our role is to set the direction and then help enable people to learn how to get there and to solve and bring forward their creativity to solve that problem. And so this is another continuum that we need to balance. When are we showing up to be helpful by bringing our content knowledge, our expertise that we've developed? And when is it our problem to solve? And when are we there to help grow and develop and help someone else learn? Something else that gets in our way often around creating this learning environment is our own discomfort with the struggle. We like to jump in and help and give someone the answer, show up as the expert because we know what to do already, and we're uncomfortable with someone not feeling certain. But if you think about all the times that you've learned something, there is inherently a struggle and a discomfort. When you're learning a new sport or say, learning tennis, it doesn't feel right. It feels uncomfortable. You have to go through that struggle process. The same thing with problem solving or learning a new skill in the work environment. The challenge for us is that we need to balance providing challenge and support so that someone doesn't feel like they're struggling too much and giving up. And so it's finding that sort of sweet spot between helping somebody move towards a challenge or something they don't know how to do yet, or a problem they don't know how to solve, yet providing the right level of support so they feel like they're growing and developing. And this is the sweet spot of the learning zone. And it's something that Toyota has been able to figure out how to do very effectively in how their leaders are grown and developed. And this is something we all need to practice more of, how we can help people learn and grow, and how do we not jump in and give all of the answers because we are uncomfortable with the struggle, or that we're feeling that life is too busy and it's just easier to give the answer. Developing a learning organization is about both getting deeper knowledge in problem-solving skills, like how to solve a problem, as well as the skills of how to develop people's capabilities for problem solving. So those coaching skills. And we need to develop both of those. So not only about how do we know how to solve problems and go through the process, but how do we ask questions? How do we support people in their learning? And how do we navigate these continuums between asking and telling and showing up as an expert or showing up more in a coaching role? And it's about learning to navigate these continuums. So it's not an either or, and none of these are right or wrong. It's situational, and this is the art of leadership. It's not telling or asking, being an expert or a coach. It's not challenging or supporting, and it's not just looking at the business outcomes or people development. We don't need to make the trade-offs. We just have to know where to be on this spectrum at any one time, what's going to be most helpful for the people we're working with, and what's most important for the outcomes that we need to be seeing in our organization for both people and results. So I've been talking a lot, and so I'm going to invite you again to practice some reflection, slowing down for a moment and reflecting on one key takeaway from this section, and you can put it into the chat. Also, if you have some other questions that you'd like to discuss towards the end of our program, you can put those in the other Q&A section as well, and we can come back to those. Yeah, so knowing where you are on the spectrum about balance. Yep, knowing what role you're playing at what time. Yes, yes. And we'll talk about that at the end too. How can you connect with what your role is in the moment? Those transitions us into the topic around asking questions, getting out of our telling habit, and how do we do that more effectively? And also, how do we listen with intention as well? On that spectrum of asking and telling and being an expert or a coach, when we are in that coaching role, the most helpful way to be started is to be asking questions, although sometimes there are times where we need to be teaching more directive. When we are asking questions with intention to help someone solve a problem or to learn, we are doing that with the goal of three things. One is to develop clarity for the other person on the real challenge or problem that they're trying to solve. Often we have this sort of presenting messy challenge, or we're feeling something wrong. We have a feeling of a problem, but we need to clarify what the real problem is. Thus, getting really specific and narrowing down into something really clear and specific. We also want to ask questions to inspire creativity. So thinking divergently, expansively, to generate possibilities of what might we try, what could be the root causes, and really understand, not thinking limitedly, but thinking expansively. And this is where we get creativity and innovation and really those continuous improvement ideas. And three, we want to instill confidence in the people that we're supporting about how to solve problems, about what next step to take, and how they can take action. And so if we can focus our questions and our actions on these three, we're really going to be able to create a learning organization. I like to think about questions in these four categories. These were inspired by Edgar Schein. If you haven't read some of his books, they're really great and short. Humble Inquiries 1. And he was a professor emeritus of MIT, and he studied organizational development for many, many years. He actually is in his 90s and lives near where I am in the San Francisco Bay Area now, and is still writing. These questions I find really helpful, and I'm going to talk about each of them. 3 are focused on really those like the problem solving process. And the 4th is really about, the first 3 are about the actual problem that the person's trying to solve. The 4th is really about the problem solving process. So open inquiry is often called humble inquiry because we're asking humbly questions for which you do not have the answer. And they're asked with the intention, with the purpose to help the other person, the problem solver, more deeply understand their problem. It's not about you trying to do the problem solving in your head. And these questions tend to be short and to start with what or how. And so anchor these words in your head, what or how. If you can start a question with what or how, you are more likely asking an open inquiry question. The second kind of question is a diagnostic inquiry. These are those 5 why questions many of you might be familiar with, of really digging down into cause. What is really happening? What was the real cause, not just the presenting cause? Why can be a really important and powerful question when asked to help the other person see cause and effect. However, beware. Sometimes when we ask why, it can sound judgmental, especially when we are asking why about somebody's actions or thinking. Why did you think that? Why did you do that? If we can frame it in terms of a process and even framing it as a what or how question, it can land better for the other person. So instead of why did you do that, what steps did you take to come to that conclusion or to take that action? Or what data did you look at that led you to take that action? It puts it on the thinking process, not necessarily on the person. The third type of question is the one that I want you to really, really pay attention to, because this is where we are unintentionally, often unknowingly, telling when we think we are asking. This funny slide is a wolf dressed up as a sheep. And often we think we are asking questions, but we're really putting forward our ideas with a question mark on it. These are prompting inquiry questions. They're the leading and closed-ended questions. Something that says, have you tried my great idea? Or something that could be answered as yes or no, or multiple choice. These types of questions limit thinking. They put a box around it. You are giving people the options or the answer or the supposed answer. Beware of doing this. And if you catch yourself asking a closed-ended question or a prompting inquiry question, pause and reframe it as an open what or how question that does not assume an answer. This can be one of the most powerful shifts that you can make in showing up and really truly breaking your telling habit, because this is telling when you think you're asking. If you have advice or something that's important for somebody to know, be genuine with it. Frame it as, I have some advice for you, or I have some information that could be helpful, rather than disguising it as a question. Then the 4th type of question is a coaching process inquiry. And this is really around the problem-solving process or the relationship between the 2 people. 2 questions I really like to ask are, what next step will you take? And what was a helpful question I asked? Those can be really powerful for both helping inspire that confidence and that action taking, and then also develop the relationship and give you feedback on the quality of your questions. And I have a guide here that can give you some more information about these types of questions and some other tips for breaking your telling habit. So you can go to my website here, kbjanderson.com/telling-habit. And I'll put that again at the end. One of the other corollaries about asking questions is that we need to listen. Asking questions and then just moving on or not giving space for listening or for thinking is disrespectful. So we need to listen openly and with patience. And this can be really hard for us. So going back to that concept of struggle, when we see someone not immediately having the answer or needing to think for a moment, sometimes we're uncomfortable with that silence. So we jump in and start talking, asking more questions or putting forward our ideas. So we need to learn to sit with silence and give people space for thinking. And this is about listening, not just with open ears, but with open eyes and really seeing what's happening for them, an open mind, so not making assumptions about what's going on or what the problem is, and an open heart, so really connecting with them from a human being. And this was inspired by my good friend, Karen Ross, and these are some drawings that she's done as well. So I get asked all the time, but what if someone's stuck? Like like they're really genuinely stuck. This is where we need to balance that challenge and support and find where's that learning zone. It's okay for someone to be stuck a little bit, to struggle a little bit. What we need to assess is if they're really stuck and like they're really like shutting down or feeling just very frustrated. That's a time where we need to step out of that open coaching zone and move more into a directive teaching or demonstrating zone. This is not about jumping in and now telling people the answer or what we think the answer is, but teaching them the process of problem solving. So I would even label what I'm doing saying, I see that you're stuck. I'm going to put, my teaching hat on, or I'm going to offer you an example of how I might approach the next step in looking at this problem. Or I know that somebody in the next department has some information that could really help you. Or I can see that you really don't understand how to display this data in a visual way. Why don't we work side by side and I can show you how you might do that. Then step back into that open coaching role and ask people, how does that help them, or what next step are they going to do? Our default, though, is to jump into this directive, teaching, demonstrating, or more telling mode, when in fact, people often are further along on this spectrum. But we need to show up based on what help the learner needs to learn. And so to navigate this coaching continuum, but to remember not to stay too long in the directive or demonstrating mode, unless they're really truly newcomers or beginners or don't know how to do something. So the more advanced they get, the more open coaching is really valuable. I'm going to pause again and allow you to sit and reflect for a moment. One key takeaway from this section that's on your mind, and to put that into the chat as well. Great, let others shine, listen with intention, ask more, the graph, not asking leading questions, listen openly. Yeah, I'm going to give you some tips around this as well. I want to give you a framework too that's been really helpful for me to think about a leader's purpose and role. So either if you're in a leadership or a management role, or you're someone who's coaching others in more of a consulting role, this applies to all of us, because in different cases, we are all leaders, and some of us, and often we're all followers as well. And I learned this from working with Mr. Yoshino and really diving into the culture of Toyota from his perspective, as well as the organizations that I've worked in as well. And a leader's purpose, if we boil it down really to the essence, is to set the direction, so where we're going, then provide support, develop their people, allow them the space for thinking and growing, and also develop ourselves at the same time. This was inspired by a quote that I heard very first time I met Mr. Yoshino, and he was talking about his role as a manager of John Shook, who was the very first non-Japanese employee at Toyota. And they were on stage at a conference. This is actually when I got Mr. Yoshino's card, and he said, come visit me when you move to Japan. And he said, he was on stage and he said, my role as a manager was to give a mission or target to John or whomever was working for him, and then support him while he figured out how to reach that target. And at the same time, I was aware I was developing myself at the same time. And to me, I had this aha moment. I'm like, that's so simple and yet so challenging for us. So I call this the leading to learn framework. And the setting direction is about providing that direction so we know where to go, where to be orienting our problem solving energy, what are the results we need for our organization, for our team. And so how do we align on that? And also, how do we create targets or challenges based on what is truly needed, not by what just is achievable? So how do we provide that challenge for people? Because if we set targets just by things we already know that we can do, we're not then inspiring the creativity and the innovation and the continuous improvement we need as well. So leaders have the responsibility of setting that challenge that helps push people into a learning zone. And this is also about challenging assumptions, understanding what is the real problem? How do you actually know? And what do you need to know? And so these are important questions that you can ask too, to really challenge assumptions and set better targets or set better challenges for you and your team as well. Then the leader's purpose about providing support. And this is really about the focus of our session today. How do you navigate those continuums of being an expert versus being more of a coach and showing up, being asking or telling, or that coaching continuum? So your responsibility as a leader, or if you're a consultant or a coach, is about creating the conditions for learning. So really, really practicing and being aware of how your habits are impacting the learning process for the people around you. So being aware of how much your habit of telling may be limiting the learning in your organization. Some questions that can help inspire thinking and experimentation are: what ideas do you have? What can you do? What next step will you take? What do you expect to happen? There are so many. And again, these are all what questions, but what or how really help inspire that thinking. And the third part is developing yourself. So we have to see ourselves also as business conditions that require improvement. So asking ourselves, what is our purpose? What is our role? What are the habits that are aligned with how the impact that I really want to have? And what are those habits that are more limiting? And starting to be aware for ourselves, when are we being too much asking? When are we showing up in this habit of telling versus asking? And what are the things that are challenging for us? And what are the things that are really enabling? So how do we continuously improve ourselves as well? I want to highlight the difference between intentions and goals. So I started at the beginning of this session talking about how intentions are about who you want to be. And so this is all aligned with what's your purpose in the moment, in your role as a person. What are those actions and habits aligned with that? Our goals are more external. What do we want to achieve in the future? What outcomes are needed for our organization, for our team, and for us personally? And these are interrelated. Who do we want to be enables us to achieve the targets and outcomes that we want as well. And we have much more control over who we want to be and how we show up. Sometimes there are external factors that don't allow us to meet our targets. So we need to strengthen the habit of asking before we jump in with the habit of telling. So both are important to know how to do, but we need to strengthen the asking habit because we tend to come forward too much with that telling habit. So I have 3 tips for you to help you strengthen your asking habit and know when it's more appropriate to be more telling or directive. So the first, which we've practiced a bit today, is taking an intention pause. So, and this is really helpful when we're like going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. You have home and then work and it's all mixed up. Sometimes you're going to a meeting, you are the leader or you are the problem owner, and then you need to show up really like doing the problem solving, jumping in there, trying to find a solution, working on it. In other cases, you're there to help a team member or someone who works with you work on a problem that he or she has ownership for. So our actions are different depending on our purpose. So if we can take even a micro pause between transitioning between meetings or engagements and identify what is my purpose, and then what are the actions I need to take? How do I want to show up to align with that purpose in this interaction? And I've also find this tremendously helpful for like stepping back into being a mom and it's just being more present and more purposeful and more intentional about how I'm showing up as a human being. The second tip is to ask a question first to assess what help is needed. So if you think about that continuum, the coaching continuum, sometimes people genuinely are stuck or really don't know what next step to take. But we make the assumption often that they need our answer right away. For example, if you ask me a question right now, I will probably ask you, what's one thought you've had about that? Or what's one thing you tried? That gives me more information about where you are on that continuum. So ask a question to assess where someone is on that continuum before jumping in to tell or to give your answer. That can be very, very helpful to balance your telling versus asking habit. And the 3, pay attention to the quality of your questions. Once you put your ears to this, you'll be surprised about how many closed-ended and leading questions we all ask throughout the day. So beware of advocacy in disguise, and really work on, if you're gonna give advice, give it genuinely as advice. And if you want to ask a question to help someone else think, don't tell them in disguise what your idea is. Ask a genuine, open what or how question. Amplifying your impact in this world as a leader, as a coach, as a human being is about working together to create more capability, more confidence, more creativity. And I always like to say that 1 + 1, when it comes to humans, equals much more than 2. And so if we're just coming in and doing all the telling, we're really limiting it to just 1. But if we can have 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, this is where we're going to amplify our impact and really create learning and creativity and continuous improvement organizations, and people who feel capable and confident. Going back to that time that you were thinking about the very beginning of our session, what are the times that you felt that you were engaged in problem solving and you felt confident? Amplify your impact by creating a more strong asking habit and starting to break your telling habit. I wanted to share this this proverb from Japan. It's related to these Daruma dolls. You can probably see behind me, I have a large collection of them here. I became obsessed with them when I lived in Japan, and I had this one actually made for me especially at a temple outside of Tokyo a few years ago. And this says intention in Japanese. This is the symbol that actually means heart, and this one means direction. And that's how I got that deeper meaning. One of the reasons I really love Daruma dolls is they're weighted at the bottom. And so they will never, if they topple over, they will always right themselves back up. And they represent this saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. So even if you stumble and fall, how do you get back up? How do you keep moving forward until you achieve your goal or fulfill your intention of who you want to be? So these dolls, you fill in the doll's left eye when you have a goal or intention, and then you can fill in the right eye when you achieve it. And it's an important reminder that we need to be okay with the struggle for ourselves as well, that learning and practicing and developing new habits as leaders, as coaches, as people is hard as well. So to give ourselves grace and kindness, but continue to orient ourselves to who we want to be and our purpose of how we want to show up. So I'd like to end our time together today, and then we'll move into questions with you setting your intention about how you're going to align your actions with your purpose, and answer this question: what is one thing you will practice with intention to get out of your telling habit? Oh yeah, I love this comment. Who knew Weeble Wobbles were from Japan? I know I used the word Weeble Wobble within a European audience the other day, and people didn't know what a Weeble Wobble was. So that was interesting. And great, thanks for sharing your intentions. I also want to invite you to connect with me. I really genuinely love being engaged with people around the world. And again, I have the free 3 tips to break your telling habit resource on my website too, if you'd like to download that. And I do know that all the slides will be available to you. I think I've seen the links come in here as well. So I'm loving to keep learning together and staying connected as well. So before we move into questions though, I have a process question for you. And that is, what is one word that describes your learning experience here today? And please put that in the chat, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So thank you so much. And please share your one word. And I look forward to connecting with you later today and into the future. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Katie. Had definitely a lot of tips and tricks in there, and just a lot of great stuff to think about. So as folks are putting in their words, which I'm loving, enlightened.
Yeah, I know, I'm loving. It's a great question. And you can do this when you're in an in-person event too, and do it. You can go around a room pretty quickly and get a pulse on things. So thank you everyone for putting that in. So yeah, I would love to open it up to some questions. I'm going to put the later I'll put the resource in for the telling habit guide as well.
Okay. So we do have a couple questions so far. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A. So first question, how do you navigate in an organization where asking questions is discouraged or considered to be an exhaustive process?
So if you were here live with me, I'd say, give me what's one example of that or the impact that that has. But since we're not able to do that here, I will do some telling right away. That's a great question. I think we always have some influence or impact on the people in our sphere as well. And so even if it's not being able to ask a ton of questions, but starting to ask a few more, and just starting with a few, I guess, a few questions that get clarity on what's the target, or what does good look like? How do we define that? It can start to develop that the culture where it's more okay to ask questions as well. So I would encourage you to find those places where a few questions or one question might be more welcome, or in a space on your team that's maybe a little bit more safe to do that.
Awesome. How do you navigate someone who is always using leading questions to control?
Oh, yeah. Well, so that's a great question. It depends on your relationship with that person, of course. So, yeah, it's always helpful, of course, if you have a relationship with someone where you're able to give some feedback directly and then to highlight that. One way that I have found this is helpful too is try and do it in a team environment. So take it away from the individual, but even be like, hey, when I went to this session, I've been really learning about questions. One tip that actually I have is how to give verbatim evidence. So just writing down exactly what people say, and actually even inviting someone to say, hey, I'd really love you or someone else to give me feedback or write some evidence on how the questions I'm asking, and trying to bring it into a team environment that then you can give them some feedback or evidence as well. So introducing the topic, and then maybe inviting sort of some group learning as well. So it takes it away from the individual. Now that's if you don't have sort of that open invitation already to give some feedback, but more sort of doing a teaching moment and then maybe doing some group learning as well.
Awesome. There's another one I saw here. Do you have any tips for people who they themselves always interrupt folks with their own ideas?
I do, because that is me. So yeah, I was appalling to me to realize how much I was interrupting people. And that was not coming from a place of, that was an example of my actions really not being aligned with who I wanted to be. I wasn't intentionally interrupting people because I wanted to not hear their ideas. I was interrupting people because I got so excited about helping them solve their problems or to share my idea. And so paying attention to that for yourself is really important. And I had to really focus. And this is one of the things I practice with intention for me, which is when I found myself, I could feel myself wanting to interrupt. And I really just had to sit on my hands. I had to figure out a process for that. And I'd go into a meeting and be like, you are not going to be the first person to talk. You're going to hear other people. And if you felt yourself getting agitated, you have to wait till someone finishes until you introduce your idea or jump in. And so it really required some intentional practice and having a clear idea of what I was going to do going into it. And really that intention pause was very, very helpful for me in developing that habit. And also grading myself, kind of doing some reflection at the end, how well did I do? What were the triggers when I really felt myself wanting to jump in? Yeah.
Those are awesome. Because I find myself the exact same.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's still, so we never extinguish old habits, right? So we only create stronger ones. So we just have to always be aware that our natural tendencies, they exist, but how do we create those sort of countermeasures or those other habits? So even I ask leading questions, or I cut people off, but I'm better at catching myself now before I go ahead and do it. So my desire to do it is still there, but I just catch myself sooner. Yeah.
It's good to know.
Yes.
There's a lot in the chat. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of folks are along with us. Do you have any tips if leaders seem to be impatient and just want to move quickly to get the right answer? Any tips on handling the leader?
Yeah, well, I think it's asking those questions like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Because so often we're just like, we do like do, or maybe plan, do, but we're not really doing that study adjust part. And so when people are coming forward with solutions, and I have some recent blog posts on my website too, where I talk about this, like we're leading with solutions rather than understanding what problem we're going to solve. So if someone's coming forward with like a solution, we just need to do this, we can say, well, what problem are we going to solve if we do this? What impact will that have? And just asking a few simple inquiry questions, because leaders obviously don't want to be solved. Like they're kind of creating this, same vicious cycle as well, because we're moving so fast. We don't like that. If you think about that fire slide, they're in this habit of like, we just got to put out the fires. We just got to go. But then we're doing a lot of action without knowing if it's just a Band-Aid solution, or if it's really going to have the desired impact. It's really understanding like, what do we expect this to happen because of this? What is going to be improved? It can help them slow down and think a little bit more deeply as well.
All right. Do you have any tips when it comes to time management? Like if you're on a deadline and you're trying to figure out a solution?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if I have any specific tips on that one, but I think it's that sometimes we do have a specific timeline. Sometimes that's self-imposed and sometimes that's real. And we have to move forward with some action. So if we can always just at least frame what we're doing as an experiment, or how could we quickly learn or experiment if that's going to be the right action. And sometimes that's the balance and the trade-off we need to make between focusing just on business results versus on developing people. But what I want you to be aware of is being intentional about the trade-offs you need to make, or moving faster and knowing you might be shortcutting some of the learning process, opposed to just doing that because you're under time pressure. In terms of like time management, I don't have any specific tips on that. There's so many time management tools out there for you to use.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you help individuals who just want you to give them the answer to problems and they don't want to actually proactively help in finding solutions?
I'm sorry, can you say that one again? I got distracted by some of the chat coming in.
Yeah, no worries. How would you help individuals who just want you to give them the answers to the problems instead of them participating in the proactive solutions?
Yeah, so I think sometimes people are, they're habituated to not being engaged. And so they just kind of have this learned helplessness. So it's about learning, maybe it's even just inviting them to say like, well, what's one idea that you have? So focusing on one thing can help it feel not as then they feel stuck, or it's feeling very new to them. But then maybe that's where you need to sit down and be more teaching and directive, like, hey, let's sit down and like, let's each generate some ideas and then come together. So asking, so feeling more participatory, but also making sure that they're putting forward some ideas and contributing to the problem solving as well.
Thank you for that. Let's see. We've got a lot of really good questions in here. Do you notice any difference in this skill with direct versus indirect communicators?
I have a clarifying question on that one. So maybe the person can you give me an example of what you mean by an indirect versus a direct communicator? So I can put that into the.
Yeah, that was from Dave Ho. If you could, or Dave Howe, sorry, if you could put that in the chat, the clarifying. So while we're waiting for the clarifying response to get typed out,
I see something in the chat actually I wanted to respond to. That was the one, like, have you had create a list of 25, 30 questions? And yeah, so I find that helpful. I actually have in my workshops about breaking the telling habit, I have like three 4 pages of different questions. You can generate those for yourself as well. It's really helpful to have some standard questions in your back pocket that you ask, those simple, short, what or how questions, and almost use it as a cheat sheet, just carry it around, because that helps you develop the habit and also takes away in the moment trying to think of that question. Because sometimes when we're then thinking of the next best question to ask, we're actually not listening and paying attention to what the person's saying. So I really encourage you to develop a list of some of those good questions to ask. Yeah.
All right. So Dave was able to give some clarification. So he's referring to people who aren't as blunt with their direction.
Yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure of what your question is trying to get at, Dave. I apologize, but you know, I guess I would be, I'm sorry, I don't really quite understand what the intention behind your question is. But you know, I think the more we can be direct and transparent and kind, and the things that we say are helpful. And I think that those people who are less direct are probably some of those people who are asking more of those questions in disguise. Those, you know, they're trying not to be telling, so they disguise it as a question, but it really is telling. But I apologize, I'm not quite sure what the question is that you're asking.
Okay, I apologize for that, Dave, because I'm trying to also understand that question. So do you have ideas for ways that folks can actually practice these tools?
Yeah, and so I'm just going to do my coaching moment in there. So that's an example of a closed-ended question. So like, do you have any ideas? A more inviting question that would sort of draw out my answer would be, what are some tools that you have? And so I just want everyone to pay attention to how often we ask those closed-ended questions that can then shut down conversation, just be answered yes or no. So what are some ideas or tools? I do. Again, I think writing down questions that you have, I dive into this in some of my workshops and doing practice. So how to break into trios or pairs and really practice offline so that we start to strengthen those muscles online. This is really the crux of the work I do with people. But how do you take that intention pause? How do you have 1 or 2 simple things that you're practicing? These are the really simple, effective tools that you're going to take for accelerating your own learning and developing those habits.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those tips. Might have to use some of them.
Yeah. I hope you do.
Oh, absolutely. I already know I'm not perfect and I can always improve. Any tips or tools on engaging our leadership?
That's a very broad question. So I'd like to say engaging them specifically in what?
So it's a little lengthy. So in a regulatory agency, we have developed a very bad habit of telling. Often our leadership seems frustrated when questions are asked and act as though you should have known.
Yeah, I mean, that's about trying to slowly change some culture. It's about creating awareness. And again, we have some influence in the people that we directly engage with. So if we each can show up a little more asking, it starts to create a ripple effect as well. So, and if you are someone who does have some coaching responsibility with some of those leaders to hold up the mirror to them and help them see the impact of their actions. So they may not, even sharing some of the things you've learned here today, we often don't have the awareness that our actions are not aligned with our purpose, really what we're trying to achieve. And so how do we help create that awareness for people? Because I think most people come to work really wanting to solve the right problems, to have an engaged, workforce, to be doing the right thing. And so if we can come with that sort of basis of understanding, that helps us be more kind to the people in our worlds who may be having some habits that are not as effective.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all those tips and ideas and ways that we can utilize this and practice. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge and being here and presenting. Katie, I'm sure a lot of folks are learning a lot and will be able to utilize this in their work.
Yeah,
and thank you to all of you for attending our session. There is still some more conference to come the rest of today and tomorrow. So please visit our website. You can download materials from this presentation or other presentations that we've had. You can watch sessions that may have missed. You can also sign up for additional sessions. In a second here, there will be a survey that will pop up. It's only 3 questions, really quick. If you could please take the time to complete that survey, we really would love your feedback. And thank you for attending the session today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And please do reach out and connect. I'd love to meet you all in person sometime, get up to the lovely state of Washington. So thank you.